The PGA Tour heading down to Texas for this week for the Hewlett Packard Enterprise Houston Open. It is at Memorial Park Golf Course. We're going to break down the course for today. We're going to talk about the field. Not a bad field either, so kind of a fun one for sure this week. Let you know what we're seeing, what we're thinking, and our favorite golfers in each salary tier over on FanDuel. Welcome on in to the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, Houston Open coming up this week. How are you doing today?
I'm good. We got the Victor Hovland hit last week. That was fun. Got it. And I even went with Victor Hovland for our end of show betting picks too.
Okay, so I have a hole to dig out of now.
You do. Mm-hmm. And despite the fact that you had Hovland in our head-to-head, I ended up winning that one barely, so that feels good.
We had a 2v2, didn't we?
I think that or a 3v3, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But a lot of overlap last week. Possibly a lot of overlap this week too. But also some vindication because we talked a lot about Hovland, Answer, and Thomas, and we said that Answer was our favorite process play, but that JT, Hovland were great pivots. Of course, Hovland won. JT did outscore Answer last week, although we were a little bit wrong with the draft percentages. They were all basically 38% rostered across FanDuel.
Interesting.
So it was basically dead even, but point remains. We talked about that again. It's really hard, especially as of Tuesday morning, to project popularity, but they kind of just shared the same number there. But either way, coming in to this week, feeling pretty solid with a good event last week. And we don't like to look just at last week for golfers and say, hey, they're in good form, but I'm going to say it for us. I think we're in great form right now.
Wouldn't it just be you, given that you beat me in the bobble hat and got the win pick?
No, I mean, we had a lot of overlap again last week, so
I'm gonna go with just you. I'll take the credit if you want to give it to me.
I'll give you credit, man. I mean, my wins are your wins aside from the head-to-head and like our bets whenever they don't overlap.
Fully false. I relish in your defeats, relish in everything that just that I can. So I disagree for sure. So this week it is the Houston Open. It is at Memorial Park Golf Course. It is 7,412 yards and it is a par 70. And not a ton of course history here because it got a big renovation. This is just the second year they have been here. So we have only one season of course history to look at. There are 132 golfers in the field. The top 65 plus ties make it after the first two rounds. So, Brandon, we do have at least 1 year to look at here. What stands out to you for Memorial Park Golf Course based on that one season?
Yeah, so this is kind of a week where you got to figure out how much we can put into 1 year of just results. And, usually for us, we need a little bit more, but also at the same time, whenever we're looking more at what stats matter, we have to be a little bit more lenient. I think I'll be less inclined just to target guys who played well here a year ago because I'd rather learn more about the course holistically than just assume that golfers will follow up their good finishes from last year with another good finish. But the green sizes here are 7,000 square feet on average, which is about 1,000 square feet bigger than your average PGA Tour course. Despite that, though, scores weren't like that low. Carlos Ortiz won at 13 under. Last year's cut line was 3 over par. There was some wind, specifically on the weekend, but not necessarily for all 4 rounds. So it's kind of telling that a 13 under score won it, that the cut line was over par, despite these big greens. And with everything, strokes gained around the green actually seemed to pop a little bit more than usual. And behind Ortiz too, like it wasn't just sort of Ortiz and then like a pile up behind him at 12 and 11 and 10 under. Ortiz finished 13 under. Dustin Johnson and Hideki Matsuyama, coincidentally Masters winners, They were the only other golfers under par. So this one probably could play like 10 under par for the winning score. And that makes for a very different event than what we've mostly see in the swing season, which is usually more birdie fests. And as we always talk about, birdie fests kind of bring everyone into play because you have fewer difficult holes. And the way that elite golfers really separate from the rest of the field is they score well on difficult holes. If it's an easy scoreable par four, for the most part, everyone in the field, maybe aside from like the bottom tier guys, the true bottom tier, it's a pretty level playing field at that point. So then variance goes up. So it's kind of a weird combo for this time of year where it probably will play a little bit tougher. We're looking not necessarily at that birdie fest. So my key stats for this week are going to be strokes gained approach, of course, strokes gained off the tee. I still want birdie or better rate because that's how golfers will separate. It's not a course so hard that I'm looking only at bogey avoidance. Strokes gained around the green and then putting on Bermuda. Those are going to be my key stats for the week.
And I think that the way to sum that up is just saying target good all-around golfers, because when it's not going to be as low and if it's a more difficult course, there are more ways you can sink yourself and there are more ways to torpedo what could otherwise be a good round. So that's why I am just kind of looking at the key strokes gain stats across the board, because I want golfers who are good all-around golfers. If it's a tougher course, as you said, there can be more separation between the cream and the rest. And so I think that's why, to me, I want to skew towards just getting the best golfers. So to me, it is off the tee, approach, around the green, putting. I know that that's really boring, but I think given the way this course sets up and also the fact the field's pretty good, I think that is somewhat necessary to me.
Yeah, the field's good. The scores, it's going to help weed out some of the weaker golfers. We have a lot of long par fours here. I think three par fours are over 500 yards. That's pretty long for a par four. We got a 237-yard par three. That is, of course, like, I'm not saying it's not reachable for some golfers, but like the difference in loft for the longer hitters is really going to benefit them, or it should in theory at least. So, strokes gained off the tee over something like driving accuracy this week, I think is telling enough, because strokes gained off the tee, most of that is explained by driving distance. That's how you gain the most strokes off the tee. But, I think that one thing that we can always keep in mind is even if we're looking at the 4 strokes gained stats, that will add up to total strokes gained, which honestly is never that bad of an idea in virtually any field. But we can also weight those differently. Like we can put more emphasis on, off the tee or approach. Although this week, strokes gained around the green, based on what we saw last year, might need a little bit more weight than usual. So, it's not just look at the strokes gained total leaderboard, play those guys. Although, again, probably not the worst.
Yeah.
As I've learned over the years, if you have like adjusted strokes gain numbers, it's really not the worst way to play DFS golf.
Yeah. I mean, like that's kind of,
we
should do it.
We want to dig in and be like proximity from this range or this range or whatever, but
just use the good golfers.
Yeah.
It's pretty tough there. Other thing I would say is, although it is a decently long course for a par 70, I would also emphasize going off the tee over distance, because looking back at last year, you had guys like Tyrrell Hatton and Jason Day who don't grade out well in either distance or accuracy individually, at least did it for the full season. Both those guys graded out well strokes gained off the tee, and they both finished well here. So I think that's another reason why. And you look at the data golf numbers, it actually favors accuracy by a smidge, I think, over distance. So I would lean towards off the tee versus distance in terms of your off the tee stat. We'll talk about the golfers who did well here last year in that one event in just 1 second. But first, hey, football fans, FanDuel is giving you the chance to bet on week 10 of the NFL season. All you got to do is go to sportsbook.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, place a 3+ leg same game parlay wager on any week 10 NFL game. If your bet loses, get a refund and site credit. Max refund is $10. Bet on week 10 of the NFL season with FanDuel by heading over to the FanDuel Sportsbook today and placing a risk-free NFL same-game parlay. Must be 21 plus, and present in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max refund is $10. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Same game parlay available for multiple sports in all states on mobile and web. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit fanduel.com/RG. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In West Virginia, 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Or in Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. Also, a quick reminder, our NFL Week 9 recap podcast is posted up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, talking about James Conner in his new role for Arizona, talking about elite offenses that have been struggling, what to do with those going forward, and more. Our week 10 preview coming up on Thursday, 10 a.m. on the FanDuel YouTube page, up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. Tom Vecchio has you covered with NBA and NHL podcasts every weekday. Austin Swaim has UFC coming up this Friday for Saturday's card. And no NASCAR, which makes me sad. But either way, still plenty of good stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Okay, as mentioned, just 1 year of course history to look at here for this event. So we're not going to do a full past history segment, but Brandon did want to dig in and highlight some guys who may have stood out to you last year based on what they did at this course. Who stands out when you look back at the data there?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the golfers who finished well, Carlos Ortiz won. Taylor Gooch finished 4th. Sepp Straka and Brooks Kepka finished tied for 5th. I'll talk more about Kepka in the current form section, but he played part in renovating this course, getting it PGA Tour ready. So, I think that's going to be one of the bigger storylines again this year, especially after the T5 last year. Sam Burns was the betting favorite at 14-1, now 18-1. So co-favorite with Scotty Scheffler. He finished 7th along with Jason Day, Tyrrell Hatton, Mackenzie Hughes. Burns nukes it, but again, not all these guys are launching it. 11th, we had Adam Long, Shane Lowry, Aaron Wise. And then in 15th, we had Russell Knox, Francesco Molinari, and Harold Varner III. We can dig more into like the strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained tee to green numbers here, but most people are going to be looking at just who finished well. So do any of these names jump off the page to you? Or do you not care enough about what they did in one iteration of this event to put a whole lot of stock into it either way?
Well, I don't care in general, but I think one guy who's interesting is Taylor Gooch because he has decent form. He's been golfing pretty well, has that 4th place finish, and he's 11-2. The issue is his off the tee numbers are not ideal, is the way that I'd phrase it. So I think that Gooch is worth his salary, despite troubling, I would say, off the tee numbers. And I think that's kind of noteworthy to me is even though when I look at my sheet, I see a big red dot in his off the tee.
Are you using dots now?
No, I should. Oh. But like it's a red rectangle. I don't know.
Is this a Google sheet with the
No.
Okay.
I use Google Sheets if I have to share it share it across my 2 computers. Hashtag how rich. Or if I have to share it on like a live stream. Otherwise it's Excel.
Okay. I just
actually honestly, so like we do the Monday night streams with Ryan Williams, and like on those I share Excel, and I might want to consider that for MLB next year, but it means I have to toggle back and forth between like
you can share Excel online.
Yeah, I could use OneDrive.
I dabbled with that.
Yeah.
And then you can use drop downs because if you have
What's
Excel,
a drop down?
Well, like an autofill. Like an autofill drop down.
What is this?
Bro, I got a lot to teach you in the off season.
I'm very confused about this.
Very clearly, you have not tuned into my streams then, but
no, buddy, I'm busy Thursdays. I have to write my stuff.
Yeah, we'll talk offline and we'll get you set. It's my look. I went through and changed your formatting for you, and you refused to use it. But it is my.
I refused to use it because you did that. I would be okay changing my formatting had you not done it.
It is my goal this offseason to have you with a firecracker of an MLB sheet.
I
for
don't think
next
you
year.
realize how much of my motivations in life are driven by spite and like stubbornness. It's
No,
not going
I
to
think
work.
I think by now
You're
I
right.
get
No,
that
of
vibe.
anyone who would understand that, it's either you. It's you, basically. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail the show about spreadsheet stuff, but it is a swing season event, so
Yeah. Anyway, thoughts on Gooch?
I like him. I think that he's going to be one of the more under the radar plays because of the salary.
Mm-hmm.
Again, fourth year last year, which might bump him up a little bit, but I have him in the 94th percentile in my long term adjusted form, which accounts for not only field strength, but also recency. So, factoring all that in, he is one of the more standout plays in the, let's say, 10-5 and above range. I
Yeah.
think I'm kind of considering the 10-5 and above range is the top tier at this point, and I might start including golfers in the low 10s as like mid range picks moving
Yeah.
forward. But Gooch, I think, is going to be he's in contention, honestly, for like the head to head, but I
Sure.
would probably have to put Tyrrell Hatton above him, and
Sure.
his salary is even 200 lower. So again, I don't think people are going to play a whole lot of Taylor Gooch because we have so many other big names in this field, and
Yeah.
the salary's high. So I think that he's going to be a great tournament pivot.
Other guy I want to ask you about based on course history is Jason Day. Because I kind of need a vibes check on Jason Day. Like that's perpetually true.
Yeah.
He hasn't played a whole lot recently, and when he did play at the CJ Cup, it was not great, specifically off the tee, which is kind of like concerning, I would say, given how good he was there over the summer. So Jason Day did well here last year, only $9,400. Otherwise, I wouldn't be discussing this, honestly. Where are you at with him right now?
So I mean, the way that he did this, and I can probably just rattle this off in a second, but I was talking about the strokes gain tee to green. He had good tee to green here last year,
Yeah.
which is if you give Jason Day a good tee to green performance, historically the putter has been good enough to get him like over the line and into, turn a top 25 into a top 10 or a top 5. But honestly, his putting has not been particularly like Jason Day level lately. It's kind of leveled off. Now it's leveled off at a still a good rate, but he's become a little bit less certain with the putter. And then whenever you factor in that his ball striking is always just kind of hit or miss, it's not really a situation where I feel inclined to play Jason Day. And on the PGA Tour, he's got one start since October, or since the start of September. He played the CJ Cup in October, finished 64th, lost 3.3 strokes off the tee, 0.8 with approach, and 2.2 around the green, and had just a neutral putter. So he would have missed the cut there. That would have been his third straight missed cut. So I don't have a whole lot of interest in Jason Day for this week.
Speaking of missed cuts, let's move to current form and talk about Brooks Kepka, who is 11-4. But as you mentioned, he helped design this course or helped redesign this course. And that's something that will be talked about, I'm sure, this week. But like we know that Kepka, when he's locked in, can, do some pretty fun stuff. So you're going to dig into his current form, see where Brooks is at right now, and then we'll decide how we're handling him for this week.
Yeah, so we have studs in this field. We have big names in this field, and Brooks is at least one of those right now. Definitely a big name. Whether he's golfing like a stud is its own conversation. He missed the cut at the Worldwide Technology Championship, though we have no ShotLink data from that event, so we don't know exactly what happened there. He was 38th at the CJ Cup with good driving, as always, and good putting. Brooks is actually a pretty good putter, especially when he gets things rolling. So I don't want to write that off because it doesn't really feel like he's someone who's reliant on his putter, but he definitely can be. He finished 67th at the Shriners with poor putting, and those are his only starts since a withdrawal at the Tour Championship. He's got a big event coming up with Bryson at the end of the month. I don't know what his motivation level is going to be, but again, he played a hand in redesigning this course. So that's going to factor in to the public perception of him this week. Finished 5th here last year with good stats across the board, kind of neutral iron play, which, at his worst, he's kind of not great with the irons. That's the biggest kind of knock on Brooks from a statistical standpoint. But that's still at least tempting to me because of a lowish salary of $11,400. And over the past 20 rounds, like even with the not great finishes, Kepka is driving it well. He's third in strokes gained off the tee, which is one of our key stats for the week. Just 37th in total strokes gained because he ranks 18th tee to green and 77th in putting among this field. So the tee to green game still can be good. And we know that the putter can be pretty phenomenal for Brooks. So like there's a clear path to another top 10 finish here. It's really not that unthinkable. But Brooks is someone we both always sort of struggle with, and we don't know what we're going to do with. So what is your read on Brooks Koepka for this week?
I mean, I think I can see both sides of it because, like, if you look back to last year when he finished fifth, if you look at his form now compared to what it was at the time, you can do this at Fantasy National. It's like somewhat similar the past 10 events to what it was then in terms of strokes gained total over the past 10 events. Strokes gained tee to green, actually slightly better over his previous 10 right now than he was at that time. But also, like, Brooks hasn't burned you for not using him since, like, maybe the Open in July. Like, it's been, he finished sixth there. He's fifth at the Travelers, fourth at the US Open. And since then, he has not finished in the top 22. The approach play has been meh. So I can see both sides of it. It just kind of depends on, like, how much you attribute the downtick to, like, not caring and how much you think he'll care here. I think it's interesting that he's been playing during the swing season because he probably doesn't have to, honestly, but, like, it's interesting that he is. So I think to me that says he's probably, like, working on stuff, trying to, get things re-engaged, which is encouraging. But, like, I just have a really hard time feeling like I need to use him. So when I'm looking at him compared to, like I think Cameron Smith's a better play at 11.6. Like Cameron Smith, decent amount. Like Gooch is there, Hatton, Neiman. There are some good names. I think that Brooks is, like, in that tier. And, like, I think I'd probably put him right behind Gooch, above Hatton and above Neiman. I don't know if that's, like, too high. I'm not sure if that's high enough for me to use him, given that I do want to get to Sam Burns. But, like, he's a tough one, which is not surprising, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk about him, not because the current form is great. Sometimes we talk about guys with current form that's either really bad or a little bit misleading, but Brooks is more of a holistic, like, you got to kind of factor in everything with Brooks. I will say that according to fansharesports.com, he is tied for first in tags, along with, and it's early, so this might change, but along with Matthew Wolff, who's getting a lot of buzz for being back. I hope Matthew Wolff's back because he's really fun.
Yeah.
But if we're going to get Brooks and Wolff at 11.4 and 11.3, generating a lot of popularity, that just makes Taylor Gooch an even better pivot. And my simulations have Taylor Gooch the most likely winner of those three. Yeah. Brooks is close. Wolff's not, because the long-term form, even with the recency adjustments, is not quite there. So just makes it easier to go to Gooch, Hatton, or Smith above them.
I think that Wolff and Kepka are the kind of guys you want to target when they're not popular, just because the volatility is, like, off the charts with both of them. So if they're going to be popular, it makes it pretty easy for me to say no. Like, I don't know if that's, like, too drastic, but I think given just the volatility, I'm okay with it.
I mean, that's the name of the game of golf. There's really never a way to justify rostering a really chalky golfer unless he is the only option who stands out, like, above the rest. And we love Sam Burns on this podcast. We love, like, Tony Finau, Scotty Scheffler. None of those guys are in that conversation, where even Answer last week wasn't so much better than everyone else that you really had to play him. So I'm going to be out on Kepka and Wolff, presuming a little bit more popularity than they deserve right now. And if it burns me, it burns me, because that's just the name of the game with DFS golf.
But the more likely person to burn you is Burns. So
I was knowing, I knew you were going to say that.
I will not get burned to this week, guaranteed. Let's talk about Carlos Ortiz, because we didn't do the full course history dive. He won last year, so let's talk about him here, because the current form is actually not bad. He's coming off a runner-up at the Mayakoba. We don't have shot link data there, but it's a bit concerning that Ortiz was 2.3 greens in regulation behind the field, according to Fantasy National, which likely indicates that he was putting his brains out. But he's gotten by other ways previously. So it's not like, Ortiz just like some putting dude. Like he gained 4.6 in approach, 6.1 tee to green at the CJ Cup. He is 16th in approach the past 50 rounds in this field, according to Fantasy National. So I'm not concerned that he feasts on the greens, but it's a tougher field this week. His salary is high. He might catch popularity thanks to the win last year and thanks to the fact that he was relevant last week too. So am I wrong to be skeptical of Carlos Ortiz at 10-5 for this week?
You're not wrong to be skeptical, but I wouldn't write him off entirely. He still has good long-term tee to green data. My stats have him in the 81st percentile in this field, which is not really where you need him at that salary, but we're also looking at really good Bermuda putting, also in the 81st percentile there. Plays well here, or has played well here, obviously, and coming off of a good result last week. I think that it can be easy for us just to write off good finishes as like variance, but there is this human element too where he probably feels more confident. And like, yeah, maybe he putted well. Last week he lost the 2.3 greens in regulation to the field, as you said, but gained 1.7 sand saves. So the scrambling's there, but Carlos Ortiz also has that in his bag of being potentially one of the better short gamers in a week. So I think he's one of the better process plays at 10-5, but if he's starting to catch popularity again, it's a really, really deep field. It's like a really even, a really flat field. So this is just the kind of week where you look around and see who people aren't talking about. And that's not to say play the guys in like the 7,000 range who nobody's mentioned.
Right.
And it's also not saying look at someone who you think has a terrible case this week and play them just because nobody, like, I'm not going to play Maverick McNeely at 10-4 over Carlos Ortiz.
Right.
The gap is still too big, but for me, it's just going to be a week where we're really trying to figure out how to be different. And it's like the easiest kind of week to be different too, because we have so many options.
Yeah, I think that's the key is, again, replaceability. Can you replace what they give you via someone else? And I think with Ortiz, you probably can, especially like, I think a lot of that was based on the assumption he'd be popular. That may not wind up being the case, but I think if he does wind up catching some buds this week, I think I'd be okay pivoting to someone like Aaron Wise in that range and guys like that. So let's move now to some lower salary guys. Your guy is a value play. Harry Higgs, $8,400. What are you seeing with him recently?
Just really good form for a value salary of 8,400. I think we're going to have the conversation of, are you going to go with a balanced build? Because we're talking about lots of golfers in the low 10,000 range, probably the upper 9,000 range too, that we would mention a lot of names we like. So are you going to go more balanced, or are you going to need value so that you can play Sam Burns plus like a Cam Smith or a Finau or whoever your preference is? So Higgs would have relevance from that standpoint. But again, perhaps the best value or best form of any value golfer that we have in the field. 39th at the Zozo, 9th at the CJ Cup with good iron play there, 27th at the Shriners after missing the cut at the Fortinet Championship. But overall, Data Golf ranks him 15th in true strokes gained over the past 20 rounds, and he's 14th over the past 3 months. Drops to 53rd over a larger sample of 6 months, while ranking still, though, 3rd in strokes gained around the green in that span. So we kind of know what we can get from Harry Higgs whenever Harry Higgs is playing his golf, and it's really good wedge play, really good putting. And this kind of sets up well for him if the stats we saw last year do pan out again this year at this course. So he wasn't initially on my radar until I really caught the form. Any thoughts on Harry Higgs this week? And maybe the bigger question is just like first impression of roster construction.
Yeah, so I'm very receptive to this range. I think that there are two guys in the upper 8,000 range I like a lot, and there's one guy down here in the $8,400 range, or 84 exactly, who I like. We can talk about him later. I'll make up my list of players down there I like later on.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of part of it is if I'm going for good wedges, I can get that via a guy who's probably going to gain strokes ball striking too, but then potentially putt it off the greens.
Potentially
putt it off the greens.
Has he ever not putted it off the green? I mean, and I say this as someone who doesn't putt well.
I'm gonna have to go back and check the film to see if he is ever not. But we'll get our team of fact checkers on this one. I think I'd rather go with someone who wins a different way than Higgs. Like, I'm receptive to it from a roster construction perspective, but him specifically, I am still not totally sold. Am I being too dismissive?
No, because we typically don't roster golfers with great short games and weaker ball striking. But I think this is probably one of the few courses where, again, it's a small sample. We can overreact or underreact and say like, hey, no, ball striking, like at most courses, is going to win out. So you don't want to chase the good around the green play that we saw last year mattering. But I like Luke List plenty. I know that's who you're talking about. I like Harry Higgs. I don't want to say more because I like Luke List, so I wouldn't be baited into a head-to-head, but I will ask you, over Luke List's past 10 measured events, how many of those do you think he has gained strokes putting?
Probably 0.
2.
Oh.
One of those was a 0.1.
That's a gain, though. That's not a negative. That's green. That's green on the sheet, baby. Or white. I don't know, depending on your gradient.
It is very, very, very lightly green.
0.1 is better than negative 5.8. So I'm just smelling victories here. That's all I smell.
Okay. He has gained, according to Fantasy National, Luke List has gained strokes putting in 34% of his past 50 rounds.
34% is better than 0. Like, I don't know. I don't get why this is a bad discussion. Like, where did you learn math to learn that 34 is 0?
If I told you that this guy has gained strokes putting in a higher percentage of his past 50 rounds than Christian Bezadenhout, Ian Poulter, Mackenzie Hughes, Denny McCarthy, Hank Biota, and I told you that man was Jason Kokrak, who leads the field in percentage of rounds, strokes gained putting. I think that if you told us that when we started the show, we would be like, how many majors does Jason Kokrak have now? Like 4?
Yeah.
Man.
The Coke Daddy. Just stroking it on the greens. Who knew? This is great. I'm into it. Speaking of good short games, let's talk about Seamus Power. Power is not someone who is going to beast off the tee, which could be a concern this week, but the other numbers for Power are pretty good, and it makes him interesting here at $9,800. Power's form is scattered, as he's largely been playing in alternate field events, stuff like that, and that does include a win at the Barbasol. Much, much worse field than this. Since that win, though, Power's made 5 out of 6 cuts. That includes 3 top 25s in 3 events during the swing season, 12th at the Bermuda, 11th at the Mayakoba. I think I'm in on Seamus Power this week. It's not a bad range. I think that upper 9,000 range is pretty good, but I'd like to be there because I like it a good amount. Where are you at in Seamus Power?
I like him a good bit. He is an other to consider for me in the mid-range, and if I didn't include, and I'm referring to my helper on numberFire, where I feature 2 golfers in each tier, each of the 3 tiers that we go over at the end of the show too. Mm-hmm. If I didn't include Shane Lowry there at 10-1, okay, Power would have been the guy at the top. Mm-hmm. So I'm very high on him. I like Shane Lowry. I like Christian Bezadenhout as well at 9,700, especially if we're playing the short game angle. I can always be talking to Cameron Tringali at 9,900. Russell Henley is kind of our guy as well, 9,800. This is a really solid range, and I've been getting a little bit more top and bottom heavy the past few weeks, breaking away from a more balanced lineup construction. But this week might be the week where I look, my win simulations have Cam Smith at 5.3% likely to win, and that's tops. That's not very high. Makes him a good betting value, by the way. But outside of him, it's Sam Burns at 4.2, and then nobody else is really it was like 3 other golfers above 3%. So I can still get similar win equity from some of these golfers in this range, or at least not drastically lower. So this, like Seamus Power, I'm really drawn to him. I'm drawn to Shane Lowry and the other guys I named. So this might be the way that I play it. And I'll probably try to lock in Sam Burns or Cam Smith into my head-to-head lineup against you, but go like a modified balance from there.
I think that's where I'm at too, where I take one of them and then just drop down, like for the second person, like drop down a decent amount, skip over the rest of the 11,000 range entirely and get down. Like I think that Aaron Wise is probably where I start to tip. Be like, okay, I can buy back in now at 10.7 and feel good about that. But like other guys around there are pretty solid too. Have you considered an Irish stack of Power and Lowry? Powerly, that didn't work. Oh, yeah, okay. Have you considered that for this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. I think Shane Lowry's undersalaried. I think Power is in a really good spot. I think they're probably close to locks for my head-to-head, like my main lineup that I use this week against you. And I think that feeling that way is telling me plenty about the golfers right above them. Again, I like some of the names there. The biggest problem for me might be Tyrrell Hatton at 11,000 because it's a bit high for putting him back into a balanced build.
Right.
But I like him a lot. So to answer your question, Lowry, Power, very much slated toward like being in my main lineup.
Yeah. Other thing I would note is part of the reason I like the 9,000 range a lot is I think that there's a massive fall off after the high 9,000 range. I think the low 9,000 range is terrible and like the biggest dead zone in this field. Do you agree with that as well?
Yeah, I would say probably so. When I filter my spreadsheet by the guys with like a 9 in front of their salary, all the plays I wanted to talk about were like 97 and above. Kevin Shrielman's probably the one guy at 93 who I would say I'm good with. But yeah, I'm with you where I would probably just drop down. And so like a modified balance could very easily just include, like we'll call it Sam Burns because I think he's the best process play of the week. Burns, of value such as a Harry Higgs or a Luke List, and then see what that gets me and just try to pepper the middle of this field.
I 100% agree, which means what could go wrong? Let's talk about the bookmaker odds here for this week. Sam Burns and Scotty Scheffler, now the co-favorites over at FanDuel Sportsbook. They're both 18-1. Dips down to Cam Smith at 23-1. Sungjae Im is 24-1. Tony Finau is 25-1. Matthew Wolff, 29-1. Before we get to a gaggle of golfers at 30-1, those guys are Brooks Kepka, Taylor Gooch, and Joaquin Niemann. Tyrrell Hatton is 31-1. Carlos Ortiz is 34-1. And then Aaron Wise rounds up the top group here at 35-1. So as we've been discussing, Brandon, it seems like our lean is one stud plus balance. Are you sticking with that as your optimal build for this week?
I think it has to be. So it's going to cause me to narrow down the studs that I like. Spoiler alert, it's really Cam Smith, Sam Burns. And then I think by default, I'm going to have to be lower on Tyrrell Hatton than I want to be just from a roster construction standpoint. I think he's undersalaried. So I could, in theory, justify making him my top golfer and getting like a powerful balance from there. But I think it's really those three. And I do think that the lineup construction this week, it makes most sense not to be digging around in the value tier. And then that goes back to what we talked about. If the scores, like the winning score is about 10 under, it's an over par cut line, something like that, that does benefit the better golfers. And at a certain point, the drop off is a bit too great to be lingering too far down into the value tier.
We're talking primarily about Burns and Smith. Are we overlooking Sungjae, Scheffler, Finau, all those guys? Are you okay with glossing over them in order to be more concentrated at the top?
So I have Sungjae as second overall in my combo model, which includes course fit, long-term form, stats I'm looking for. So like he's a great play, but this is the type of field where we have, again, we're talking about ways to pivot at every single spot. Like you could just like throw a dart. If you printed out the list, threw a dart and said like, here, 9,700 is the salary. Find me like a pivot above and below. You can pretty much do that. Maybe 97 is the worst example I could have picked because we said it drops off right there. But the point remains where like, it's nothing against Sungjae. It's just that I think Burns is a better play. I think Cam Smith fits here really, really well. So, we're overlooking them. Yes, but it's not because I don't think it was because we would say we would dislike them. Like,
right.
I have Sungjae second, Scheffler's ninth in my model. Finau's 18th, but Tony Finau is also just really good at golf. But like Cam Smith's 4th, Burns is 1st, Brooks is actually 8th for me. So it's like you can't play them all.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with not liking those names. I would say, if anything, I like Wolf the least, but that's just because he's still trending back from a really bad time in his career.
I think the toughest decision for me would be, I think Burns is 1. I would consider going Sungjae over Cam Smith for number 2. But
I'll take a bet for the fun of the show.
No.
Okay.
I mean, like, I don't have a lot of conviction in it, and like I'd prefer to go with the ones where I feel strongly, and I'm still kind of weighing it. But I think, like, if you told me right now, hey, Sungjae's roster rate is a lot lower than that of Cam Smith and Sam Burns, sure, I'll take the pivot. I think that's where I'm at with Sungjae right now. Is I'm monitoring popularity, and if I think Sungjae is going to go overlooked relative to those two specifically, I'll pivot to him.
Yeah, and I always like feel strange doing shows like this because sometimes it comes down to like, well, just try to track and see like who people aren't talking about. But
Right.
You can't really make a case for Cam Smith over Sungjae Im and like pound the table and say, no, like you cannot play Sungjae Im. Now, if you want to talk about popularity, I will say that Sungjae has no tags yet on Fanshare. So he might be the guy who just kind of goes a bit overlooked in that event. Again, I have Sungjae Im ranked 2nd in this field. Like, I'm just not playing him because I think Sam Burns is better at $100 more in salary, and Cam Smith at least jumps down $300 in salary. So, but like, that's what golf is, especially in a field like this.
Do you show any betting value on Sungjae? Just this is for me. This is not for the listeners. I don't, I love you listeners, but I'm just curious for me.
Let me check. Sungjae is minus 0.4%.
Where is that relative to Burns? Who's the better value?
Sungjae's the better value.
Okay. Just asking for me selfishly.
It's just that Cam Smith is the lone like betting value.
Okay. Noted. Might have to bug you about this later too.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not like maybe I'll post these on numberFire at some point, like my win simulations or something. But
okay, keeping an eye on this.
And
are they up already? Did I just ask you something that's already posted?
Yeah, they're up.
Oh wow, okay, cool.
No, it's fine because numbers do change, and I try to update it when I can. I updated some stuff last week because the numbers changed so much on Answer.
Updating content's a nightmare because like I do that like that Friday piece for NFL stuff, like, and it talks about injury reports, and then like it gets posted 9:30 on Friday-ish. By 9:45, half of it's outdated, and I hate it. So posting or updating content is a nightmare. And I do put updates in there sometimes, but like I wish I didn't.
It's tough. And like the floor ceiling simulations I do for NFL,
right,
I publish this Friday, and it's like we get clarity, and so I try to go in Sunday morning most days when I can. But you also don't want to like rush things and update stuff that's like not completed. So
yep.
But I think I think people kind of can make some judgments from there though too.
Yes. Okay. So which golfers' odds have shifted most significantly since things opened? There was a lot of movement. So what stood out most to you?
Like everybody moved. Almost nobody shortened, which is possibly noteworthy. But I will say that Sam Burns did go from 14 to 18 to 1, which means that he just opened up as the favorite, but is now like the co-favorite. So that could help with some popularity. But I do think that, again, the research shows, and we talked about Justin Thomas last week, like he ended up being the most popular golfer by a little bit. So
it's like a magnet that carries a lot of weight, basically, like drawing them up towards the top.
Yeah. Sungjae Im 18 to 24. So that's pretty noteworthy, especially if you play the angle of Sungjae being a value. Aaron Wise 29 to 35. Adam Scott 31 to 36. I think more notably would be that Scotty Scheffler stayed pat at 18 to 1. While everyone else sort of moved around him. Seamus Power shortened all the way from 50 to 47. And then the only other movement I saw from Monday into Tuesday was 3 long shots. Charlie Hoffman, Jonathan Vegas, and Taylor Moore at 90, 90, and 100 to 1 all stayed there respectively. And I like all three of those names, specifically Vegas, specifically Hoffman. I would be fine with Taylor Moore though as well.
I love Hoffman and I love Vegas. I almost had both those guys in my player picks. I see that they're yours, so I'm glad that someone's covering those bases. Power 50 to 47. Does that impact your view at all of him in that really good tier, or is it more so, hey, his odds may have been longer than they should have initially?
I think he's like the 1B in that tier if I can include Lowry. And if I look only at golfers below 10,000, I would have Power ranked number 1. So Power, I would have Power ranked number 1 there. So I'm going to play a lot of Seamus Power. I think he's a really good process-based play this week. And the lone drawback, I think, of the balanced build is that we do have Vegas and Hoffman below 9,000. And I think that they very easily could be like 94 and I would still want to play them. So that might be the route, like a Burns plus those two and go from there.
I have that now. Other thing with Power, I think he actually opened at 60 and he's now down to 47. So
well, that would be okay. I mean, I pulled these pretty early, but
there's some steam here. I'll say that. So you mentioned Vegas and Hoffman. Anyone else with lower salaries with good odds that stands out to you?
Gary Woodland is 90 to 1, Joel Damon 90 to 1, and Russell Knox 90 to 1, all at 9,000. So that's nice and symmetrical there. Cameron Davis and Taylor Moore are 100 to 1. Davis is 8,800 this week. Moore's salary is 8,400. So we've got Moore, List, and Harry Higgs all at 8,400 in a tougher week with like the field at the top feeling a little more like we have some standouts. I would be very drawn to that, but
yeah,
it's like also the kind of week where, you know, you can play Taylor Moore, Harry Higgs, and Luke List in your lineups and then still kind of get the top of the field wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always a little bit daunting to me. And I would rather play the again, it's still a low probability that Moore, Higgs, and List like are top 10. So I would probably rather just avoid them. Take the value with Vegas and Hoffman, who I think are both very clearly undersalaried by a bit, and not dig down too much farther unless I really change my tune on the top of the field, which seems unlikely.
There's a decent chance we have like a 1v1 in our bobble hat this week, by the way, based on the way this sounds.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think there's a very obvious build though, which is why.
Yeah. Just avoid the low 9,000 range. Like that's the build to me. Like whatever route you take to get there, I think that's where I'm at. Weather for this week, you mentioned there was wind last year, not as much this year. Chance of rain early in the morning on Thursday, should be clear by around 10 a.m. Wind speeds will be around 7 miles per hour early in the morning and then increase to around 11 miles per hour by 2 p.m. on Thursday. Similar pattern Friday without the rain. Winds a hair lower in the morning than they are in the afternoon. They never get above 9 miles per hour there. There could be some wind late in the round on Sunday, but not enough where I'd look at wind splits or anything. So to me, I don't think there's too much here to justify altering process or anything, you know, bumping guys up or down. I think it's pretty straight for this week. Despite there being some wind, some rain, I think we should be good to go. So with that said, let's dive into our player picks here for the very long title Houston Open. Brandon, who stands out to you in the upper tier on FanDuel for this week?
Cam Smith, good hat game, and that's enough for me. But
does the hat? So, like, okay, question for you, because like Sam Burns had this going on at 1.2. Does the facial hair factor into the hat analysis? Does the facial hair have to mesh with the hat? Like, how does this work?
I'm not a facial hair guy.
You have facial hair,
but I'm not like a. I have facial hair because I don't shave often enough. That's basically.
But like. Cam Smith is a wild-looking dude. Sam Burns used to be. Thankfully, he shaved and then won. Like, you know, maybe take a hint, man. Like, I think, like, you know, does that factor into the hat model?
No, they would be two different models. I don't have a facial hair model. I think it's fun. I always kind of side with guys who are a little more degaffy when it comes to the facial hair because I've been there.
It's a very corporate sport, and when you see guys deviate from like the corporate clean cut stuff, I'm into it. But not the Sam Burns. like mustache. That needed to go.
Well, like
That was
watching
bad.
the Ryder Cup and watching like Daniel Berger in a hoodie, like I was like, this is giving me life because it just speaks to me. But yeah, long hair, whatever facial hair, like the hat game really comes down to like you, and it's like an expression of individuality. It's a humble assault on the commonplace, as I like to say, which I stole from White Collar, which is a show we both love,
I don't
but you
remember
don't
that
seem to
line.
get it.
I don't remember that line. I've not rewatched it in a bit. I started to, but then I got sidetracked.
It's a great show.
It is a
but
great show.
there's a little bit more to Cam Smith to like this week than just the hat and just the hair and just the mustache, facial hair, whatever he's got going on at this point. But, I do think Sam Burns is the better process-based play. But outside of that, there's a lot to like about Cam Smith. He is the most likely winner according to my win simulation model. He should benefit at a course that rewarded around the green play last year. He's in the 96th percentile and adjusted around the green play over the past calendar year. He's in the 97th percentile, both in birdie or better rate gained and bogey avoidance. So that works at a course where winning score is probably going to be around 10 to 13. So I'm all in on Cam Smith. And I kind of get the vibe that we are shaping up toward a 1v1 in our head-to-head. So I might pivot from Burns, who I do think is the better, safer play, to Cam Smith just to get some fun going on for this weekend.
Okay, so you don't want another 1v1 like we had in the NFL last week. Gotcha.
No, especially because that did not go in my favor.
Should have. It should have. I'll say that. I did not deserve that win, but I'll take it. I've got Sam Burns here. It doesn't really have many weaknesses, which goes back to what we discussed at the top, where I want well-rounded guys who can take advantage of a tough field and a tough course. Burns ranks 9th off the tee, 6th in approach, 21st around the green. He's also 2nd in Bermuda putting, which is one more path to success, but also one less path to failure. The play for Burns during the swing season has been awesome. He has gained at least 8.2 strokes tee to green in 2 out of 3 events, finished 5th in the one event where he didn't reach that because he putted well. I think he's worthy of the top slot here. I think that Burns is a tremendous option. I'm going to use him in the head-to-head. You can pivot if you want, but I'm not going to. Who else do you like here in this upper range?
I like Tyrrell Hatton. I think he's going to be a way that we can differentiate a bit at 11,000. It's a good salary. And if you're really going balanced, you could make the case, I think, for Hatton to be your top golfer. He's 2nd in value among golfers with a salary of at least 10.5 in my model, behind only Sam Burns. We're about a year removed from when he was in his best form, but there's a lot to like again. Since the start of October, he's finished 2nd at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship, 18th at the CJ Cup, 40th at the Worldwide Technology Championship. He also rates out 96th percentile in adjusted strokes gained tee to green over the past year during his time on the PGA Tour. So when I say I might try to pivot away from Burns for our head-to-head, Hatton, I think, needs to be part of that to make up for the win equity I'm kind of foregoing with Burns. But Hatton, I want to make sure is like, I'm kind of making it known that he's probably my 3rd play at salary behind Cam Smith / Sam Burns. And then I think it's Hatton, number 3.
Okay. Would you like a
Yes.
Hatton? Hatton versus Sam Burns bet. You answered way too fast, so I'm pivoting. You answered way too fast.
Well, I was like, anyone in that range I'm probably going to be good with, so.
You knew I was going to ask Aaron Wise, so I pivoted to be Sam Burns because you answered way too fast there. Way too fast.
I'll take a Hatton over a Wise bet.
Okay. I'm frightened how fast you answered. Anyway, let's talk about Aaron Wise here. I think he's great because, like, we talk about how floor is stupid, and it is. I agree. But Wise is consistent, aka good floor, with upside, which to me is a combination we should value most. He's gained at least 5.6 strokes tee to green in 3 straight measured events. He gained 6.5 2 before that. Wise ranks 21st off the tee, 32nd in approach, 5th around the green. The issue obviously has been putting, but that's at least getting less bad. He's gained in 4 of the past 6 measured events. His most loss in that time is 1.7. So maybe the putting becoming less terrible, maybe. He's 10-7. I think that helps offset Burns' salary quite a bit, which is nice. The $3 can go a long way. Where are you at on Aaron Wise this week, despite the fact you're putting Hatton above him?
I like him fine. It's just a kind of like a casualty of not being able to play everyone there. I have him 13th in my model this week. Lots to like about him. I was trying to do the math in my head, but I don't think I slept enough for that. But kind of viewing like a Burns plus Aaron Wise versus Cam Smith plus Tyrrell Hatton. It's probably about the same.
Yeah, it is.
It should be 100 off. So
yeah,
that's like a conversation I think I'd have to have.
Okay.
And I might side with. I think I would side with the Cam Smith Tyrrell Hatton. There.
Do you want to make that a 2v2 bet?
I'm gonna have to like add stuff up then.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's way too much. So let's move down to the mid range. What you got down there?
Sorry, I clicked over because I thought you were making me do another bet.
No, I'm not going to make you do math. That's way too harsh. It's just rude.
I know this math. Shane Lowry's salary is too low.
Hey.
So I know he's above 10,000, and that's usually our cutoff, but I don't know. It's our podcast, so it's kind of whatever here. He finished 11th here last year, was 4th in strokes gained tee to green during that. I think he's a good betting value at 46-1. His the long-term form's good. He's 99th percentile in adjusted tee to green play and around the green over the last year. I don't really have a whole lot else to say. I think he could easily be 10-7, and I would still have interest in him.
Yeah, I think that Lowry definitely interesting to me in that tier. Also okay with Seamus Power, a little bit low of that, saving a tiny bit of salary. Power, we talked about him in the current form, but that form holds up even when you adjust for like playing against weaker fields. If you look at Data Golf's true strokes gained, Power ranks 5th over the past 6 months. The guys ahead of him are Sam Burns, Cam Smith, Scotty Scheffler, Adam Scott. So yeah, Power did it in the Barbasol and lower level fields, but he was good enough to move the needle even when you adjust for that. The short game is good for Power. The ball striking seems to be trending up. So I'll take that for sure at $9,800. Any final thoughts for you on Power or Lowry, Brandon, or this range in general?
I've got Power ranked 5th in my model for the week, which is actually better than Lowry, but I would probably just side with Lowry by a tinge outright. But
you could just really go both. I think that both is probably the route.
We kind of have like Lowry and Power, and then Vegas and Hoffman, just kind of all seeming undersalaried. So what I might try to do is build some lineups where I have just one of each of those and then duplicate and then just rotate in, get that combination going. But honestly, I'm going to play both a lot.
Yeah, I think that's the right route. Okay, who else do you have here in the mid-range?
So I mentioned Kevin Shrielman as the name in the low nines that I would prefer, but I think that's probably mistaken because I think I would just take my chances with Emiliano Grilo at 9,100. Missed the cut here last year when he lost 1.5 strokes to the field, but gained 3.6 strokes from approach, lost 4.2 strokes with his wedges and putter, which is pretty typical for Grilo. The concern is always the putting, but he's been kind of decent on Bermuda over the past 100 rounds, according to Fantasy National, losing 0.11 strokes per round, which, if you know anything about Emiliano Grilo's putting, that's close enough to neutral where you're okay with it, especially for how good the tee to green play is. He did play here last year, and I think people probably will just write off the fact that like, oh, he missed the cut, so doesn't suit him well. But playing a course at least like for 2 rounds, whenever a lot of golfers are coming in having not played it or seen it as much, I think there's value in that. So Grilo at 91 does stand out to me in this range, but I don't really anticipate building in the low nines anyway.
Yeah, I think that with the Grilo, like, having seen the course, like, I'd rather have them have seen it and missed a cut than have not seen it. I think that's the way I'd phrase it there.
Yep.
You mentioned Shrielman. I'll talk about him here. I agree with you where I'd like to avoid this range. If I wind up where I'm like, I really like the other 5 guys, don't want to change that, and I'm in the low 9,000s, I would go Shrielman. Been in kind of a funk recently. He hasn't finished better than 31st since August 15th, but some of the stuff is still there. Shrielman ranks 23rd in approach, 54th off the tee, 45th around the green. This hasn't put it all together at once in the same event in a while, which is disappointing, and the reason the finishes have been underwhelming. I still think that's in there, though, and this low 9,000 range is underwhelming, so I would rank Shrielman highest. What I would say, though, is I want to get up, I think probably It depends on your view of HV3 because he's $9,600. Otherwise, I'd make the cutoff 97. I think that I want to get back up to like 97 at least. Do you agree that's where the cutoff occurs after 97, 96 or so?
Yeah, Varner, I think, is very playable. I have him 15th for the week. Ian Poulter, I could see the case for at 22nd for me. He's 9,500, but again, just not really the right range. The win equity for those guys really starts to drop off compared to the upper nines and low tens. So there is a bit of it's like a more gradual drop. And then whether you would say Poulter or not, like right after that, there's a pretty drastic shift there for me. So, I don't anticipate, and again, I think Kevin Shrielman, Emiliano Grilo, justifiable plays. We don't like recommend golfers that we don't like just to have people covered. It's like you can make a case for them, but it's just really the bigger question is, are we going to build lineups that require us to roster them? Probably not.
Ideally not. I think that's the way I'd phrase it. Let's move down to the low range, the value plays. Who do you have down here?
So we both like Jonathan Vegas, so I'll lead off with him. He is the top value for me in the sub 9,000 range. His salary is 8,800. He just has like good stats across the board. He's kind of a neutral putter on Bermuda, and anytime you get even neutral putting with good tee to green golfers, you want that. He's in the 88th percentile for me in adjusted tee to green play. Was 44th here last year. Good ball striking, bad short game. That's in the cards again. A 44th is not going to really move the needle, even at 8,800. So that's the question with Vegas, is whether the short game shows up. But even if he's like okay with the short game, we're looking at some higher upside. So still a bit of a floor because he does nuke it, and the irons are generally good. So that's like the closest thing you can have to a floor in golf. And if there's anything beyond that, we're looking at top 15 potential.
I think the good thing is the short game is not an outlier in how bad it is.
Yeah.
Like there are guys like Luke List with his putting who are outliers in how bad they are. Vegas isn't that. Like he's not good, but he's below average, but he's not an outlier in how bad he is. That's why he's my favorite guy down here too. $8,800, gonna crush it off the tee, good approach play. I think that he makes a lot of sense. So I agree. Vegas number one. I almost put Charlie Hoffman as my second option. You have him as yours. What drew you towards Hoffman?
Just going back to him, he's a really good golfer long term. Like he's underrated. Austin Swaim and I have talked about who does our UFC podcast and a ton of other content for us at numberFire. We talked about how Hoffman's just kind of long term underrated, and that's really the case. He's in the 91st percentile and adjusted tee to green play over the past year. 29th year a year ago. Good Bermuda putter, just one of the better value plays. Again, if his salary was 95, I'd still be interested. Same for Vegas. If it was more realistically like 92, I would want that. But I can get like 4, I would say, under salary golfers with Power, Lowry, and these two guys that I think I just kind of got to go there in my primary lineup.
I think that that's kind of like something I wish I'd do more in the NFL, is just like focus on the undervalued guys. Like I believe in my process of like game stacks and stuff like that, but sometimes I just need to take some value. Yeah. I think this is the format for doing that because game stacks don't matter. So I agree those guys are all undervalued, and Hoffman right now is in my bobble hat. Probably leaning towards keeping him there. Other option would be Luke List. And there's a reason why I'm going with Hoffman, is because List is not a cash game type option because the putting is really bad. Missed the cut last week, but that was not as long of a course. This one is long. List is probably going to crush it tee to green. Ranks 5th in the field off the tee, 21st in approach, and actually 34th around the green. So we say the short game is bad for List. We're focusing specifically on the putting. There is one area where he will lose, and as Brandon mentioned, he will lose there. You can almost bake that in. But he's had events where he has still finished top 7 despite not putting well because everything else is so good. And he's better on Bermuda than Bentgrass at least. So that's good. Having the ability to finish top 10 while losing strokes putting is not something most guys in this range can do. So I think that that's the reason I am inclined towards Luke List, is he can do that. Not a lot of guys down here can. So I think List is my favorite of the guys, 84. Are you going Higgs? Are you going Moore? What are you leaning with down here?
I currently have List first because he's just the better long-term player, but I might flip that.
Okay.
It's just it's tough to overcome, and I don't know how to say this, 0th percentile Bermuda putting. I think I'd probably rank them more Higgs list at this point. I think I need to make an update to my helper on numberFire.
Okay. Well, when Luke List wins, you will owe him an official apology on the podcast.
Can we do a more versus list bet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
For sure.
Would you also do a Higgs versus list bet?
No.
Okay.
I'm more inclined to more for this one. Let me just double check this quick before you write it down.
No, it's already it's in writing.
Yeah, that's actually fine. I'm good with it.
Are you?
Yeah, because like Higgs is like really good at the short game, whereas Moore just kind of like, whatever, So yes, I am better with the more head to head.
I like Taylor more. So
I like Luke List. So we'll see. Okay, let's finish up with our win picks here. Didn't forget this week. Based on the odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook, I think I know where I'm going. Do you want to go first or should I?
For sure I'm doing Cam Smith.
Okay.
At what, 23 now?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know from there. You have to.
I'm going slamming Sam Burns and Seamus Power. Sam Burns 18-1, Seamus Power 47-1.
Give me then Lowry.
I like that. 46-1 for Shane Lowry. I like that one. I think that's a pretty good pick. I'm gonna make good picks this week. Maybe we are in a heater, like you said. Maybe you were correct to give us credit. I am looking forward to closing out all my tabs on Friday, very early in the morning, saying, "Oh wow, all these guys missed the cut." And that will be a whole lot of fun. So you have Shane Lowry and Cam Smith, and I've got Seamus Power and Sam Burns. I actually think those two line up salary-wise as well. So that's like a 2v2. Anyway, we're not going to do that because that's a lot of math. Anyway, that is all that we have here for the Hewlett Packard Enterprise Houston Open. Why do they just make these names so long? Anyway, that's all we got for this week. Brandon, any final words of wisdom for the listeners before they go to fill out their lineups this week?
It is a really good field overall. Very deep and a lot of pivots. Again, we're not recommending Sung J M, but it's not because we don't like him. I think Sung J M, if he continues to have no tags, no buzz, is going to be a phenomenal play. Same for like Tony Finau, Scotty Scheffler. So it's going to come down to game theory this week. So be open to, as people say in the writing world, killing your darlings and just not playing the best process plays and making the better long-term decision.
Is that like killing off like characters in books, or what does that mean?
Yeah, like in your ideas and like whatever's not working.
This is why I'm not a writer. I can't do that.
I'm not either.
Says a man who's written a book. Anyway, that is all we have here for today on the PGA side of things, but still plenty of good stuff on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Of course, NBA, NHL Daily via Tom Vecchio, UFC Friday via Austin Swaim, NFL Week 10 preview Thursday at 10 a.m. on the FanDuel YouTube page and up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed immediately after that. So search for it wherever you get your podcasts, hit subscribe, and leave a rating and review. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcasts. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups for the long-named Houston Open. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.